right. Hey, Natasha, welcome to. I'm so thankful you agreed to speak with me. So you and I have never met. I think we got connected a while back through Pepperwater or something like that.
We did.
Mutual friends. So you are probably the second Anglo Indian in the U.S. that I've spoken to. I've personally met one, Charlotte. Do you know Charlotte
Hmm.
Daniels from
I
Texas?
do not. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, her maiden name is Daniels. Okay, I met them through Pepperwater a long time ago, but I haven't met you. So welcome, thank you. Tell me about you, who you are, where do you live? I know you're in Indiana, right? But I'll let
Hmm.
you give me
Yes.
the rundown.
Yeah. So I was born and raised here in the US. My parents, however, were born and raised in Chennai. And so my dad in the 70s moved to New England. He actually finished his senior year of high school living with his great uncle. He and one of his sisters came from India to stay with his great uncle, who unfortunately passed away within a year of my dad and his sister being in the country. So, and then also his wife passed away. So they were kind of, left to do their own thing for those formative years, right?
Yeah.
Because my dad was at that time about 19, I think,
Oh
and
wow,
yeah, and his sister was about 14 or 15,
kids.
and yeah, yeah. So, but anyhow, my mom actually had been my dad's childhood sweetheart, and they had lost touch when he came to the U.S. But and
Is
she
your
was
mom
still
also
in
from
India.
India?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah, yeah. Both my parents met in childhood in Madras in
And then
Chennai.
they separated, but they met up back here again.
Well, it's funny actually, since both sides of my family knew each other from childhood,
Yeah.
because they all went to pretty much St. George's School in
Okay.
Madras,
Yeah.
if you're familiar with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so both sides of my family knew each other quite well. And actually, my dad also lost his father after coming here too.
Mm.
So it was actually when my mom happened to send him a condolence letter that they had reconnected. And so when he went to visit India to go visit his family, he
Yeah.
happened to meet up with her and they rekindled their romance. And yeah, within months of that, they got married and
Mm.
then he brought her over. I mean, this wasn't like right away. This
Yeah.
was
Okay.
about 7 years
Okay.
after he had been living in the country. So,
Okay.
but he was back then, at that time, he was in Massachusetts. I
Okay.
was born in Boston,
Okay.
a year
Oh, I
after
heard the I
he
heard the
moved out of there.
Boston accent come up when
Oh,
you said
really?
Boston. Yes.
That's really funny because nobody ever tells me that. They all say I sound like a Midwesterner because I've
Yeah.
been living in Indiana now
Yep.
for, let's see, 32 years,
Oh
I
wow.
believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the only reason why I'm in the Midwest is because back in the day, my mom, the company she was working for, she got relocated to Indianapolis. And we happened to come to Indiana to visit very distant family
Okay.
uh, on a school trip. I mean, not a school trip, not a school function, but I mean, sorry, holiday,
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
holiday. And my parents just liked the area. They said, "Huh, maybe we should move here." And I was like, "No," because at that point in my childhood, I was 12, and we were
Sure.
living in New Hampshire, actually.
Yep.
Um,
That's beautiful. Do you?
it
Yeah.
All of New England is really nice,
Yeah.
and you know, even though my parents were born and raised in India, I was raised
Sure.
basically as American.
Yeah.
We weren't ever like around any Indians when I
Yeah.
was little, and if we wanted to eat Indian food, we'd just go to Boston because you couldn't really find a good place to eat, locally or anything.
Yeah.
And getting the ingredients in the regular grocery store was
Yeah.
yucky.
Yeah.
So, So, but moving to Indiana came about when my mom was putting in a job transfer and there was an opening in Indianapolis. So we moved. I didn't want to move, didn't want to be in a different part of the country, leave all my friends and whatnot, but we did anyway. And I'm an only child, so you
Oh,
know,
nice.
it
Yeah.
was easy for my parents,
Yeah.
to get us situated and stuff. But so I started sixth grade, and it was just like a whole different world. So, and I don't know about you, but my whole life, like all my years of school, even on the job, sometimes I've had people who have bullied me
Mm,
or have been racist.
mm,
So like that was always like a thing, and it
yeah.
was just so bad when I moved
Mm,
to the Midwest because so first of all, in New England at that time that I had lived in New England, um, there were hardly any people of color whatsoever.
mm,
It was just kind of
yeah.
you know a
Yeah.
sea of white people everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And come to the Midwest and you've got all kinds of nationalities, and so very quickly it was like, what are you? I would get
Mm,
that question from
mm,
people,
yeah.
and they weren't really understanding the fact that I was Anglo Indian.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, they would just start asking me like, where's the dot on your head, and
Mm,
and like, what kind of food do you eat at home, and how many languages do you speak, and silly things that were just really
sure.
didn't fit with with my
Sure.
life.
Sure.
And so I actually had somebody who called me one day for a school project, and my mom had answered the phone, and they were so shocked with how she sounded. And I said, what did you expect her to sound like? I mean, so because both of my parents, they had very prominent British accents, right?
Mm,
From
yep.
from
Sure.
going to an English boarding school,
Yeah.
but in India. So, but I always had had a very pronounced American
Sure.
accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, for most of my adult years, I didn't even really like think about it in my 20s and early 30s about being a minority. But I had one of my bosses call me that, and it just like startled me because I just got so used to just
Yeah.
being what I am, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
when you get people who are like, oh, what nationalities are you in you and
Yeah.
this and that, they
Yeah.
don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So always interesting. Hmm.
That's fascinating. I did not know you were born here. So,
Mm.
so that throws off a bunch of my questions, but that's
Oh,
okay.
okay,
No,
okay.
no, no. Which is fascinating. I've never met an Anglo Indian who was born here,
Oh,
right? Uh,
wow.
so yeah, so I always assumed you were born in India. So I was going to ask you about your friends and your childhood there, but
Hmm.
where you grew up, but that's not existent. But it's clear you were in. I can't do the Boston accent, but every time you say Boston, it's very clear. so, so that's great. So St. George's School, I'm very familiar with it. I have a couple of friends. I grew up in India, and I moved here when
Hmm.
I was 27. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, but I'm very familiar. Have you been to India?
I have. I
Yeah.
have. In 1987,
Okay.
I took a trip there with my parents, met my family for the first time.
Wow. How old were
Because
you? You don't have to answer that. In
Oh
1986.
no, that's that. I'm totally fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was 8. We
Okay.
got there the day before my birthday, actually. So
Oh, nice.
that was the first time. Well, it was funny because the only family I knew were my aunt and my 2 cousins who were living near me in New Hampshire at the time. Um, so we got to India. It was my first plane ride, my first time out of the country,
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
first time being around other Indians other than in the presence of
Wow. What an
either an Indian
experience.
restaurant. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. And we also had a doctor friend locally, and she had kids who were somewhat my age. And so a couple of times I'd been to like some functions that they had, but that was the extent of my being around anybody who was Indian or family. And going to India was complete culture shock.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
And back then, okay, in 1987,
Yeah.
so we flew Pan Am, and
Mm.
we had all the different American food that you could pack in a suitcase. And I took my entire collection of Barbie dolls and stuffed animals that I had at the time, and some other things. And let me tell you, it was probably a solid month before I felt brave enough to try some of the food that
Oh, how long
my
were you
family
there?
cooked. Well, so I was supposed to be there for summer vacation.
Got it.
And I was also supposed to be there so that my mom's sister, she had me in her wedding, and I was her flower girl. So I was supposed to be there for
Sure.
all of those things. Well, we had, I don't know, like it was kind of strange. We ended up extending our trip. My dad really wanted to stay, and there were just some things that were going on, where we ended up staying there for almost a year and a half.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So even though I never lived in India, I lived in India, right?
Sure. Sure.
So
Yeah.
I would visit with my grandparents, my aunts and uncles. Back then, I had one cousin uh, on my dad's side, and none of my other aunts and uncles were yet married. I had
Yeah.
a few who were even still in school and things like
Mm.
that, right?
Which part of
So,
Madras were you staying at this point in time?
mhm. My dad's family lived in Tambram,
Okay.
and my mom's family lived in Pallavram.
Okay.
So not too far a
Yeah.
distance between the two.
Yeah.
But they lived, I remember my mom's parents, my grandparents, they lived over by the airport.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I loved being there because I'd sit up on the terrace and we'd all watch the planes go
Yeah.
by and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Of course.
Yeah, now the
Also,
whole area.
the way you say Tambaram and Palavaram is very
Uh-huh.
clear. You were not born in India as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. Yeah. Sorry. Tell me.
No, I was just gonna say, like everything around there is so different now. I had been back to India
Nice.
in 94. 94 was the last trip.
The last trip.
Yes,
Uh,
it's been a while.
yeah. Yeah.
But when I went for that trip, it was because my dad's sister was getting married, and I was in her wedding. And that was also supposed to be a short trip, where we came right before Christmas time. Actually, though, we did extend our trip only a little bit. So we were there through March of
Oh wow.
90,
Okay.
or let's see. So that was, you know what? I think we got there at the end of 93, and it was 94 that,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
in the March 94 that we left. So, yeah, so I mean, I definitely got my fill of India, but it was really good to connect with my family because otherwise I had no,
Yeah.
experience around them or
Yeah.
anything. And, actually, over the years, we lost my grandparents,
Yep.
and recently one of my uncles and one of my great uncles as well. And so, the fact that I actually got to meet them,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
was important to be
Yeah.
able to at least have
Absolutely.
that. But at the same time, I've always felt like I've been very far removed from the rest of the family because
Yep.
I didn't have that connection like everybody else did with each other. And everybody, quite honestly, got used to my parents also being away,
Yeah.
that it was hard for them too, to be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
pick up where they left off with
Yeah.
them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is like it's interesting that that you. I find it fascinating that you because my whole concept of Anglo Indians, right, is just growing
Hmm.
up in India,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so that was established. So it's fascinating, like that you, well, you are an Anglo Indian, but that's passed on to you, right? I mean, you are American by birth, and that's a nationality, but Anglo Indian is also that you still use that as like my kids. Well, my kids are a little weird since my wife is Caucasian and they were born here, so they don't see
Yeah.
themselves as But if my
Hmm.
wife was also from India, right?
Hmm.
Right, it would be weird like to look at them and you're Anglo Indian as well. It's a
Yeah.
Anglo Indian with a spin. It's I'm glad because it's important. I think culture is important. It's good to track it down.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I should preface all of this anyway. I mean, I'm married to an American, a
Yeah.
Caucasian. So
Yes.
our daughter, she's had her own issues with identity and stuff
Absolutely.
because of
Yeah.
looking a little different and
Yeah.
whatnot. But at the same time, to me, like she looks more white than anything. So, but she always gets mad when I say that, so she'll probably watch this and roll her eyes.
Well, I've kept up with your family, and I've seen pictures on Facebook, and I've watched your family grow and change, and your daughter's off to college, I think,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Which I think we've been friends for a while now, and
Oh
we've
yeah.
seen, so
Hmm.
my daughter as well. So yeah, if we can talk about the multicultural family, that would be great. I can tell you, my
Sure.
daughter, my son, my family is like a gradient. My wife is the whitest, then my daughter, then my son, and then me. So we can like fade in and out of rooms if we walked in a straight line.
That's funny.
But
Yeah.
I asked them, and they just, I just asked them like, how do you see yourself? They're like, well, we were born here, we're American. That's the only thing they know, right? They know nothing else. And luckily for them, they grew up in a relatively safer space. I think the times are a little different as well to when you were growing
Hmm.
up, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
So
Hmm.
they don't go about it thinking their day thinking about it till suddenly the accent pops out of nowhere, like the Boston version, right? And they'll make fun of me sometimes because sometimes it'll pop out like super thing. But yes, so my daughter always would like to be browner for some reason. I
Hmm.
don't know. She said
Hmm.
she loves the summer, so she likes that part of her. So yeah, tell me. So I think we probably share the same situations at home with a multicultural family, but
Hmm.
you have no accent, like an Indian accent for your daughter to make fun of you. Like my kids would suddenly make fun of me, like shake their head, like right.
Well,
So other than that, like how was
yeah.
it, and how did you intend to raise? Was it anything intentional when you were having children? Like, okay, this is how we're going to raise. Things are different, all right. Like
Hmm.
you obviously have that conversation with your husband and say like, hey, this is how we're going to raise her, and or was anything intentional, or was just like a normal American family?
So it's funny you should bring this up because I should also say that my daughter is highly interested in the topic of Anglo Indians.
Oh,
So
nice.
that as she's studying in college, she's actually a history major
Oh,
and
wow.
wants to um, educate people on Southeast Asian history
Yeah.
from the American perspective
Yeah.
because of how little of it is known in
Yep.
the American education system.
Yep.
Um, so, and I say that because when I was growing up, right, my parents were very much, you're not Indian, you're not American,
Yeah.
you're not even British, but somehow like you're in between all of this.
Yes.
And so the mentality that they were raised as to kind of like stand out and focus on the fact that you speak English very well, you're educated, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
all these things, um, to carry yourself differently and to be, you know, a well-behaved citizen or whatever, that kind of
Sure.
thing,
Yeah.
right? And so in my school days and whatnot, I was expected to do my best at school, but not forget where my family heritage was from. And so, even though I was allowed to do all the different American things and stuff
Yeah.
because that was all I knew, all
Yeah.
my friends were
Yeah.
American and all that, When it came time to being a mom, uh, honestly, like even when I met my husband, we were in high school. We were high school
Oh,
sweethearts.
really? Nice.
Yeah, yeah. But by then, I mean, I was pretty comfortable in just being American.
Yeah.
And so there was never really any like special conversation really to be had about how we would raise
Yeah.
our daughter because it was just like, okay, she'll go to the school system,
Yeah.
we'll celebrate all the regular,
Yeah.
holidays and things like that, because we live here.
Go to
Excuse
prom,
me.
which is a strange concept for me, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. We did prom
Yeah.
together. Yeah. Unfortunately, pandemic made it to where my daughter couldn't have
Ah,
prom,
bummer.
but
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, what was cool was she did go to the same high school we did. So
No way.
because, yeah, yeah, and because my parents had that whole thing with St. George's, they had always taught me to be very true to the school that raised me, basically,
Mm,
right? But for me, I didn't have that same sort of thing like they did because of,
sure.
how much we moved and things like that.
Yep.
And so only when we came to Indiana was I in the same school system from sixth grade through 12th.
Yep.
And that meant attending two different schools, middle school and high school.
Yep.
And so by the time I graduated from high school, like that school was the one that I connected with. And
Yeah.
so as an alumni, like I'm active in some things with our
Oh,
school
nice.
system and stuff like that. So
Even though your
um,
daughter has since moved on, you're still, oh, that's great. Yeah.
yeah, I do some things.
Yeah.
Mhm. So in that sense, like I feel like my parents' influence is in how I
Yeah.
volunteered at school when my daughter was in school
Yeah.
and just, made sure that I was promoting what they were doing and all that because it was like a way of giving back
Yeah.
to the community.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah. I
Hmm.
know St. George's. St. George's, yeah, they are pretty. They, I know some people who go there and they still meet up and they talk because I think
Hmm.
most of them were boarders. I'm not too familiar with St. George's. I think because of the boarding school, it
Hmm.
was your family. It
Hmm.
was a very tight knit group
Yeah,
of people.
yeah, yeah. In fact, when my parents were first in the country, well, when my dad was first in the country, um, like he has some distant cousins and all that who
Yeah.
live here, right? And once he married my mom, and once my aunt also got married and had my cousins, um, we were the only people that we knew of who were Anglo Indians
Uh,
in our area.
sure.
When we came to Indiana, to my knowledge, there has never been any other Anglo Indian family here
Mm,
that I'm not related to. But my dad was the first out of um, our family to be in Indiana.
yeah.
And eventually, I think you probably know one of my aunts actually, who's in
Yes.
our group. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she and her husband have my other cousins, and so they, are here in Indiana. But then the other aunt of mine who was already here, that came with my dad, she ended up moving to Indiana too for a
Yeah.
time. And actually, one of my cousins did too. One of her kids came. So,
Indiana,
like,
who knew? It's like
I know, I
hop in,
know.
apart from Texas, Indiana is like the
A
Anglo capital.
little bit. I don't know. Well, at least for my family.
Yeah.
So, but I always
Hey,
used
to
to
be
hear
fair,
these
in
stories.
Texas, most of the
Yeah.
Anglos that I know are part of
Uh-huh.
one family as well.
Oh,
It's the
I've
Daniels, I think.
oh, yeah. Well, and I do actually have some family in the Dallas area.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Hmm. I have a couple cousins and stuff over there. So, um, but I also am heavy into my family's genealogy.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
um, I don't know. Have you ever taken a genealogy test?
I have not, only because I just figured it's probably not set up for us, and it's a little weird. You
You
know,
think so?
yeah, I don't know. I've been hesitant. At least, yeah, I don't know how. Yeah, but what did you find? What's your,
Hmm.
if you can talk, if you want to talk about that, like what's the mix? Do you?
Yeah, I find it so fascinating. So on my dad's side of the family, they came to India from Germany like
Okay.
a few hundred years ago to uh, minister to the people of India. You know,
Sure.
they were Lutheran missionaries,
Okay.
and so all throughout the area in like uh, I'm trying to think of the areas there, Cochin
Okay.
and uh, Tranquebar,
Okay.
I believe. My family was all over there before coming down to Chennai area.
Okay.
And so I had always been told that we had this German ancestry, but somewhere along the line, you know, somebody was Indian and all that,
Sure.
so that
Sure.
obviously there was the
Yeah.
coloring. And then on my mom's side, they were Scottish. She has a Scottish last name, and so Scottish and English, and also again some Indian thrown in somewhere.
Hmm.
But nobody ever really like knew where any of the mixes came from.
Yeah.
Oh, and on my dad's side too, I should say, there's Irish because his mother's side had Irish mixed in, but
Yeah.
my grandmother wasn't fair, so she also had
Yeah. Yeah.
some
Yeah.
Indian thrown in, who knows.
Yeah.
So it was always such a mystery to me to really find out like about my family. And I think probably the first time I was actually interested to try to figure something out with our tree
Yeah.
was when we first moved to Indiana because I remember being at the library with my dad, and the librarian saw our last name and she said, "Oh, I had a professor with that name. Are you related?" And we were like, "What?" We had never heard of anybody outside of our
What's your maiden
family.
name?
It's Koloff.
Okay. Okay. I see. Okay. Okay.
Hmm. It in German, it's supposed to mean cabbage fields. So I don't know if you are familiar with Cabbage Patch Kids, but I always joke that I'm the original Cabbage Patch Kid.
Is it? Is it the Cabbage Patch? Maybe I'm making this up, but I know somewhere in Georgia, not too far from me, like an hour away, they have the house where they make the dolls. I think it's
Yeah,
Cabbage. It
yep.
is.
You're
Okay.
you're you're not imagining it. That's
So
correct.
did
Yeah.
you go there? Did you
I
happen to go?
have no, I haven't.
Okay.
I
Okay. Yeah.
haven't.
Okay.
But
So that
back
is
in
the
the
Cabbage Patch
day,
Kids.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's the same doll, right?
Okay.
Yeah, back in the day those were so popular when I
Yeah.
was a little kid. So I had a few of those. I don't know, they're so ugly, but they're, interesting. So
That's awesome. So
but yeah, when I was told that there were other people with that last name, I my dad and I were both like, huh.
yeah.
Where where is that from? Like,
Yeah.
are they from our tree distantly or what's the deal? And so within a few years of that, um, the internet became a thing. I should say that because anybody listening to this, who's much younger than us, they'd probably think, "What? What are you talking about?" But yes, I mean, for the most part, I grew up without the internet, so because it just didn't exist. But when it did, in the late 90s, I can remember doing a search to see if there was anything out there that would link me to anybody who was familiar with anything that we knew about our family tree.
Yeah.
And my dad knew bits and pieces from the great uncle and, the one he stayed with, but
Yeah.
also my grandparents and my grandma, great grandma too, because he had her in his life in a big way when he was growing up, and she was actually around when I got to visit India, so the
Oh
first
wow.
time. Yeah, so that was the only great grandparent I ever met,
Mm.
so that was cool. But in doing that search,
Mm.
I came across somebody else who was distantly related a couple generations over from my family, and we
No way.
fit directly into their tree, and we were just flabbergasted because they knew like who my great grandparents were
Oh
or my
wow.
great grandparents were, but they didn't know anything like who the kids were,
Yeah.
and what happened after that. because their side of the family migrated to Australia and had since
Yep.
been in that country
Yep.
for generations. And so, through a series of corresponding with one of those people, we figured out where we all fit in the tree. He came to visit us for a brief visit, which was lovely. And it was also so weird because he was a lot fairer than my family,
Mm.
but his mannerisms and some of his features were very much like one of my uncles. It was just like mind blowing to think,
Mm.
oh my goodness, we really have, these people. And none of them were raised Anglo Indian because it wasn't in their
Heritage.
heritage,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they were so far removed from
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
they knew of Anglo
Yeah.
Indians and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's actually a lot of Kolofs
Mhm.
in Australia.
Oh wow.
And I actually have, from both sides of my family, a lot of relatives who are in Australia.
Yeah. So does
So, mhm.
how much does your daughter identify as Anglo Indian, or does she like, if she, is that something she would casually bring up, or like how much does she identify? I know she's even one step removed
Mhm.
from you, right?
Yeah. So it's really funny because when she was born,
Yeah.
my parents really told her all these different stories about growing up and
Yeah.
things like that, that she identifies as an Anglo Indian more than
Yeah.
I do from hearing their stories. Like she can
Oh,
make puffs, she can make chapatis,
what?
yeah. And she loves that stuff. She did a school project on puffs, making puffs with the recipe and everything. And she she did a report on my mom, interviewed her. She wrote a college paper
Oh wow.
actually on some of the stigma with being Anglo-Indian and stuff like that. So,
What does she have? Like, I'm sure she's done all this research and she has all this information and some data, probably memorized or stuck. You know, if she ever wants to chat, I'd love to chat with her as well. Um,
well, yeah,
if, if
maybe
she's up
she
for it.
would.
Yeah, yeah, that's fascinating.
Hmm.
So she's off to college. Are you empty nesters now and living
Yes,
the life?
hmm yeah. I mean, it's been a natural flow.
Yeah.
It's been now 3 years since she's been in
No
college.
way,
Yeah,
really?
yeah, yeah. In fact, she's going into her senior year next school term. And then after that, she plans to continue to do more education to get her master's degree.
Nice.
So she's just going to be learning for a while,
Mhm. Is
but
she still
it's all good.
interested in like history? Is that what she
Hmm.
wants to pursue?
So museum studies, and I think the other part is pending. I think she's doing something like library science and some other sorts of interrelated stuff that would
Okay.
help with the museum studies.
So I assume she's
But
a reader then. She
she
reads a
is.
ton. Yeah. Yep. Ah,
Yeah, she does in spurts, but
yeah.
I think she likes to find documentaries more than
Yeah.
anything, to watch those.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So I know you touched on taking your Barbies to India, and
Yeah,
I know that sparked something that caused you to take it on seriously and do something with it. So
hmm
so tell me about that. How it began. What was the spark, and what do you
sure.
do now?
Yeah. Well, it's quite the story because, again, as being an American person, I identified with the Barbie dolls because
Yeah.
it was something that um, afforded me, the imagination to dream up of,
Yeah.
all the different things that Barbie could do that I could do.
Sure.
And in the 80s, with the doll being popular, there were also several shows that I used to watch that I would act out things with my
Mhm.
dolls from those shows because they were kind of similar, because there were other, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the show Gem and the Holograms, but
Vaguely.
it was a singing type of thing,
Yep.
where it was a girl band and whatever. So my Barbies would sing, that kind of thing. Um, I personally was not like into fashion, but I loved the idea of my dolls having all these backstories.
Okay.
And um, because I was an only child and because I was picked on a lot, I played by myself a lot, or I played with kids in the neighborhood. But especially when I went to India, the dolls were my safe haven
Yeah.
because it was the peace of home to me.
Sure. Sure.
And, there being 8 years old is kind of hard. You're not a little kid and you're not an adult by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And I will say that I was a very awkward kid
Mm.
and teenager.
Yeah.
And hell, I would say even adult, it's not easy being,
Yeah. Yeah.
that. So, but for a lot of years, Barbie was very crucial to my psyche and my creativity and things like that. And so when in 1987, the doll had not yet come out in India. So everybody who saw my dolls, they were like, "Oh, what are these things?" And they actually, I don't know, well, you're probably familiar with that, what is it, Bombay Bazaar or whatever, where it's like the doll festival.
Yes, vaguely, yes.
Yeah. So my family was telling me you should have your dolls on display and then the neighbors can see your dolls and all this and that. And so while everybody else was doing whatever in their homes with dolls
Yeah.
and candles and who knows what all things, um, here I was in my grandma's house. I had my Barbie chairs and I had a patio set. My dolls, they're all sitting there. And people were just fascinated with them. And
Sure.
I made friends with a couple of girls while I was there. Um, Next door to my grandma, there was this girl who was mentally ill, and she was older than me, but she was able to play with me on the same level because of, the
Sure.
issues that she had. But she loved my dolls. And uh, in Christmas of 1987, first of all, nobody warned me that Christmas was celebrated differently in India than it was in the US. Okay. So I asked the Santa question. I got laughed at.
Mm.
They were like, "Oh, it's so cute, that you believe in Santa and, that kind of thing." Well, Christmas Eve, going into Christmas Day, the local official for the Madras area in Tamil Nadu passed away, MGR. Shut
Oh,
down
you were
the
there? Wow.
entire
Yeah.
city. Nobody could get food, nothing. And my family didn't, they weren't prepared. And so everything was shut down. Nobody had gifts, nothing like that. And my mom had actually said to me, "Why don't you give your neighbor or the neighbor friend a doll, one of your dolls?" And I actually did not want to because I
Sure.
said, "Why would she want one of my dolls? I mean,
Yeah.
it's Christmas, that's weird." But she said, "No, no, I think you should give her one of your dolls. It'd be a nice thing to do as a gesture to your friend, all that." I said, "Okay, fine." So
Mm.
I picked one,
Wait,
and
sorry, who told you this? Your mom or your
my
grandma?
mom, my
Okay.
mom, my
Okay.
mom, yeah, which is important because she did it again another time while I was in
Mm.
India. But I walked over there, and this girl wasn't home. Her name was Lena. Lena was not home. So I left the doll with, I believe it was her mom. And she said, "Oh, she'll love this. Thank you so much." Within, I don't know, a couple hours, Lena, she came over with her sister and she wanted to give me something. Excuse me, I'm not getting emotional. I'm just
Mm.
allergies.
All right.
Um, but she came over because she was so overjoyed by having my doll that I had given her. that she wanted me to have the one thing that her parents gave her for Christmas that year, which was a baby doll that she
Wow.
had unwrapped that morning. And it was this, skinny little
Mhm.
blonde
Sure,
doll that
sure.
made noises and stuff when you moved her. And I was just so amazed. I'm like, she wants to give me this brand new thing just because I gave her this
Yeah,
old doll.
yeah.
But I was so like surprised and it really humbled me. Um, and I didn't look at Christmas the same, first of all, after that, for
Mm,
many, many reasons.
mm,
It forced me to realize there was more to life than just having things too.
mm.
But it also taught me that friendship is important. And so uh, I can't remember exactly when in the scheme of things the second oh boy, instance, there we go, instance of donating or giving away a doll happened, but I had another friend who actually was a distant relative, and my mom had said to me yet again, why
Mhm.
don't you give her one of your dolls? And I'm like, really? If I keep doing this, I'm not going to have any dolls left. That actually was, in my head.
Sure.
You think I would have learned, but hmm. Um, but I did. I was nice and I gave her a doll and she started crying and I felt really bad, because I'm like, oh, well, I guess there's something to doing this.
Mm.
And during the rest of my stay in India, uh, Barbie actually came out, and so I actually had one of the first Barbies that were
Oh,
sold in
wow.
India.
Nice.
I did.
Is it opened or is it still in the package? So,
So I actually don't own her anymore
mm,
because, and it's funny that you ask me about it because back in let's see, 10, yes, so 2010, my daughter was just starting to get into playing with Barbies. And at that point, I did have the rest of my dolls. But as like 2011 ish, that range of time was marching on, um, my daughter was almost the same age I had been in going to India for the
mm.
first time.
Oh,
And
wow.
I knew that she had no knowledge whatsoever of what it's like to go to India, to experience that poverty,
Yep.
all the different things that
Yep.
make you glad to live in this country.
Yep.
I mean, really, right?
Yep.
And I was really concerned that she wasn't going to have that life lesson that I did.
Yeah.
And I really was bothered by that because it was always, the mentality of living as an American. You think differently in terms of the holidays, all the
Yep.
gift giving, all these different things.
Yep.
And it was so different to how I had lived through everything because at the point where she was 7, I was really um, wanting to own less and just love on my family more and have more experiences with them rather
Yep.
than material items.
Yep.
So I said, what can I do to drive that point home to my daughter about giving away something of hers that would make a difference and change her mindset?
Yeah.
And that Christmas time, in, let's see, first, second grade or whatever, um, I I said, you know what? Maybe we can give some of our dolls away to
Mm.
kids in your school who are, um, you know, low income families or
Sure.
whatnot. And I asked the principal about it, and he says, I don't have a problem with that. And I said, well, how many kids are there? And he named like several hundred kids. And I said, oh,
Uh,
I don't have that many dolls, you know, because I wanted to actually give some of our dolls, not have brand new dolls to,
yeah.
buy and give out. And so uh, I said, well, I mean, okay, I have 10. Can we do 10? 10 or 12? he says, okay, I can pick, certain families and you can definitely gift to those kids. So
Yeah.
that's what we did. And I put them in gift bags. We put brushes, clothes, all different things in these little like wine bags of dolls. And the day they were being donated, my daughter was waiting for me to pick her up from school, and the teachers were handing the dolls out. So she got to experience the
Mm.
dolls being given to some girls she actually knew.
Oh, wow.
And she wasn't going to say anything, but I think she was too excited for the
Mm.
fact that she was watching their reactions and how happy they were to
Mm.
receive these dolls, that she went over to one of them and said, "That was for my mom and I."
Ah,
And
ah.
so that girl was like sobbing, and she gave her a hug. And so my daughter couldn't wait to come home and tell me all about it. And it was
Mm.
really sweet. And that's when I knew we were onto something, because, you know, she learned about giving to somebody. She learned that, as well as what it means to have something of yours as a gift to somebody,
Yep.
a friend.
Yep.
And um, so it became kind of like our hobby to find other circumstances, that
Mm.
we can donate dolls of ours to. And a couple other things came up, so we were able to do that. And then she joined a Girl Scout troop, and they were looking for a service project during the holidays. And so at that point, we explained what we had been doing, and they were interested in collecting Barbie dolls too. So I said, okay, let's see who we can find um, to give the dolls to. And we actually, there was a neighborhood home explosion right around the holidays that year. It was not really close to us, but I mean, it was
Okay.
in our city,
Sure.
or just out of it. And so people from all over were, collecting different things for them.
Mm.
And one of my friends happened to be a volunteer for an organization that was directly, collecting stuff.
Yeah.
So I said, let's do that. Let's do something for them. So we did, and they liked that. And I decided, let's name this what my daughter and I were doing, and
Mm.
we called it the Barbie Girls Project, because we were the Barbie girls and this was our project to
Yep.
do.
Yep.
So that name kind of stuck. And then when we weren't doing things with Girl Scouts, it became like a hobby of mine to look for other places to donate dolls to.
Mm.
And so I was really good friends with the troop leader that my daughter had for a Girl Scout troop. And that lady said to me, "You should go online, and if
Yeah.
you're wanting to do more with this,
Yeah.
other people would help you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I'm
Mhm.
just doing this kind of
Sure.
my own little thing. It's nothing
Yeah.
that major or whatever." But I said, "All right, because by then I had some other places that were interested in some dolls, and I eventually had donated out all of my dolls to all these
Oh, wow.
places. So I actually needed more dolls.
Mm.
So I created my Facebook page for the Barbie Girls Project. And I don't know how fast it happened, but it happened. People started contacting me on a regular basis, and it's never stopped.
Oh, wow.
Um, I had one of the first people who contacted me outside of the area was from Japan with a doll.
Oh, wow. I thought it was
Hmm.
in the country.
Not even in the
Oh, wow.
country. Yeah. Um, and since then, like I've had people from all over the US and a couple other countries too, but most of the time it's US based people who are
Sure.
contacting me. But they all, started finding me on Facebook, and people wanted to give me their dolls so they could be used for kids.
Mm.
And my whole focus at first was on little girls who needed friends or lived through traumatic experiences or could use some self esteem boosts, right? Um, and when I would approach churches and other entities to see if I could partner with them,
Yeah.
I was like given the cold shoulder in a lot of cases because I was told that it wasn't inclusive enough, being that it was for girls and boys aren't going to play with dolls and,
Yeah.
just all these
Yeah.
kinds
Yeah.
of things. And I should be collecting toys in general, not Barbies.
Yeah.
So, but I persisted in what I was doing because I felt very strongly about the doll, because the more I kept doing it and
Yeah.
hearing stories from people who wanted to give me their collections, and I should say too, it wasn't that I wasn't collecting new dolls too, because I do.
Yeah.
Certain situations they can only use new dolls
Okay.
because, like if it's at hospitals or toy
You.
drives, they want all
Yeah.
new stuff
Sure.
so
Sure.
that the kids feel good about
Yeah.
opening something. Um, but the rest of the time, the dolls are loose or in boxes, but the boxes might be dinged up from
Sure.
storage or something
Yeah.
like that.
Sure.
And people go crazy for donating to me all of those dolls because they want to see somebody loving them
Yeah.
like they've
Yeah.
been loved.
Yeah.
And that's really important. And so uh, I've heard so many stories from people about how much they appreciated the dolls, and the dolls were um, instrumental in the different things that they
Mm.
did with their lives, or it gave them memories with their family, the people who were their role
Yeah.
models and different things like that. And so um, eventually I had guys who liked the dolls just as much
Mhm.
as the girls, and so I changed what I was doing to encompass just anybody, right? Anybody who wanted
Sure.
a doll.
Yeah.
But um, I think a lot of it changed over the years, uh, so that by the time the pandemic came around in 2020, and I was still getting contacted by people,
Mhm.
even when we were all holed up in our homes, I had like boxes of dolls piling up.
So is there like a room in your house that's just filled with Barbie dolls all the time?
uh, so right now, I would say that's my garage.
Are both
Eh,
cars in the garage or out the garage? Is there room for a car?
one car's in the
Okay.
garage,
Okay.
and it's come and gone. I mean, as far as like the
Sure.
stuff, but I think I've probably given out over 2,000 dolls by now
Wow. Over the what
over
period?
the since 2011
Okay.
till now.
Wow,
It
that's
we've
amazing.
Yeah, so it's been really cool,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of how this has all gone, really.
So you are pretty much the founder of you and your daughter in
Mhm.
some form. How how much of time do you invest? How do you see that? Because I'm listening to that story and I think it has, there's a lot you can do with it, and I'm sure you have plans for it as well. Maybe you want to be small and that's also okay to not think everything should not get blown up and made something big, But what do you have any plans to make it, to grow it and make it a bigger thing across the country, make it more official, or you're just happy with where it's at and you would like it to be like that?
So in 2020, I was actually working for a nonprofit
Okay.
as my day job
Yeah.
uh, when I wasn't writing, because I also write.
Yeah.
And I got connected with a bunch of different organizations, and it led me to want to try to do something with the Barbie Girls Project more
Yeah.
specifically. And in 2022, I became a social enterprise, as a for profit social enterprise, selling doll items to fund the things that I wanted to do
Sure.
with the dolls. And it did not take off the way that I anticipated, because ultimately, what everybody wants to do is to have a doll or to get rid of a doll.
Yeah.
And nobody really wants to like buy Barbie things. And everybody thinks that it's such a great idea to have doll events, but I've always had an issue with people actually coming to any of the events that I've run.
Yeah.
And it's been a very strange,
Mhm.
strange few years. But after giving it a go for a couple of years,
Yeah.
I decided to not be uh, functioning, as a for-profit social enterprise any longer, and to just go back to it being
Yeah.
um, just a hobby of mine,
Yeah.
and not be, any sort of organization. But in doing that, it's kind of like my arm of what I do with my writing.
Yeah.
So when I make money through any books or blogs, that's what I'm putting into the Barbie Girls project.
Wow.
So that's
Okay.
kind of how I'm doing that.
Have you ever thought of a wild idea of just emailing somebody from Mattel and saying like, "Hey, here's a history of what I do. Do you want to partner up?"
I mean, yeah, I mean, I have reached out to some people before. I never have heard from Mattel
Yeah.
officially,
Yeah.
but I will say that when I've had any certain videos and posts,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're aware of me because they did give me permission to use the name in one of my videos. And I was like, I get this notification. I'm saying, oh no, are they going to like tell me,
Cease and desist.
yeah, right. That's what I was prepared for. But no, I had their permission. And so
Oh,
I said,
that's
okay.
something. Yeah.
So I said, okay, they're going to let me alone.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to make waves. And that was another reason why I didn't go into being a nonprofit because I've never felt right about making the Barbie name anything coined,
Yep.
for all the copyrights. And I
Yep.
didn't want to get into any of that stuff.
Yep.
And after all, I'm just one person doing something
Yep.
for the community and communities around me.
Yep.
Anybody can do it.
Yep.
And certainly, I'm not the only person who does this. So, my big focus right now has been to network all over the place
Yep.
and have people in other states who can help me in collecting dolls and being a point of contact for anybody who lives in that area who
Yep.
wants to donate dolls somewhere. And so I'm still trying to build up places where people can donate to in other states because I've only been able to find maybe a dozen places throughout the country that accept dolls.
Hmm.
Others are like, no, we want clothes, we want gift cards, we want money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just going to depend. And so a lot of it is just with my relationships with places that I become aware of. And so I have workshop content that I've also put out there. Workshops being doll related. And so I've written out curriculums for like a doll storytelling
Huh.
workshop where kids can write a story about their doll, and uh, some journaling, and Friendsgiving was another big thing of mine,
Hmm.
where I wanted kids to celebrate their friends because that was something that the pandemic changed for my
Yep.
daughter and her
Sure.
friends, where they
Yeah.
weren't
Yeah.
communicating. And it was just very heartbreaking to see how kids everywhere couldn't,
Yeah.
keep up
Yeah.
with things. And so that has been also the other focus of what I'm doing in
Hmm.
restoring friendships. But people are still not wanting to make the time to do that with their kids or
Yep.
having their kids be free
Yeah.
to be able to play.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're all stuck on their devices. And
Yeah.
that's driven me mad for,
Mhm.
quite some time. But
So,
um, yeah,
so I know you mentioned your writing, and I want to talk about that. But before,
yeah,
I think a good way to tie up the Barbie Girl project is two things. One is how do you collect, and we can add the links down in the description.
sure.
And
Hmm.
I think I have your website, but it's pretty much your Facebook page or your website. Which one gets is easier for people? You found like historically easier for people to interact with and send you
Hmm.
stuff.
I'd say the Facebook page is
Yeah,
probably the way to go
yeah,
because you can message me there. You can
yeah.
post, onto the page directly.
Okay.
Um, I do have the BarbieGirlsProject.com as my website. And my email there is Natasha at thebarbie-girls-project.com.
Okay.
So people are free to, reach
Okay.
out that way too.
Good.
But honestly, if you just do a Google search for the Barbie Girls Project, like
Yeah.
a bunch of things pop up um, that I
Yeah.
intentionally
Yeah.
have that way. So people can find me. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously, you don't have to be in Indiana or in the US. So people from
Correct.
anywhere in the world can,
Yes.
even from India, from
Yeah.
Tambaram and Palavaram,
Sure.
can
Sure.
send the
Why
Barbie
not?
dolls in.
If they want to. If they want.
So,
Yeah.
so the last question about the Barbie, did you and your daughter go watch the movie, and what did you think about it?
Uh,
Did you dress the part, or tell me about it?
So I watched the movie actually with my husband, if you can
Okay.
believe that. So my daughter watched it separately because, she wasn't here. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't dress up, but for a few years I was doing a trunk or treat event with a local church where I
Right.
did try to dress up as Barbie and I
Right.
handed out candy and Barbies. So when
Nice.
the movie came out, I was really trying to um, make that particular trunk or treat that year, be all
Yeah.
festive and whatnot.
Yeah.
And, kids really like that because I had a little mobile uh, oh my goodness, a photo booth.
Okay.
I had a friend of mine who made a photo booth frame that says Barbie.
Uh,
You might have seen the picture with me holding it, but kids love that because then they can
mm,
take pictures with their costumes on and things like that. So
nice.
that was really fun. But I did like the movie. I really felt like the mom in that movie. Um,
Mm,
I connected with her because the same issues that she had and nostalgia that she had with her daughter
yeah.
when
Yeah.
she was little. I could relate to that so much because I loved Barbie for so much longer than my daughter did because of how things were so different by the time she was growing up
Sure.
compared to
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
was, a kid in the 80s trying to play with whatever was out there
Yeah.
and amuse myself
Yeah.
between, sun up to sundown. It
Yeah.
was different.
Yeah. So when you said trunk or treat, I already know I already picked up on some. So that's obviously part of a church, right? You do your trunk or treat. So
Mhm.
so yeah, I know. So tell me about. I know you're a published author, and that funds some of your Barbie initiatives, right? That's
Mhm.
awesome. So
Thanks.
so tell me about your books. What have you written, and what's it about? How many have you written?
Yeah, so I have one novel that's historical fiction. It's a series that came to mind when I was actually a teenager and had just moved to Indiana and was very, very much an outdoorsy kid
Yeah.
who uh, missed the New England landscape. And I wanted to create a storyline that was. Um, Somewhat familiar, but at the same time different on purpose so that I could kind of have something neutral to write about. And for many years, the story stuck in my head, and I wrote this like rudimentary
Mm.
version of it um, that I didn't seriously look at publishing till a good 20 years after the fact.
Wow.
So when I did, I had this goal in my head to try to approach a publisher for it. And lo and behold, I connected with somebody who was with a local publishing company who was interested in taking a look. So she agreed to publish it. And so it took me another year to get the book finished for
Mm.
that. And
Yeah.
the storyline actually was about um, a family in 1905 who lived through the death of the family's patriarch. And so it was all about like the life of this young woman and being able to have a place to call home which that's the title of the book, A Place to
A
Call
place
Home.
to call home.
Yes. And so that book got published back in 2017. And then the publisher went out of business
Mm.
6 months after the
Oh,
fact.
6 months after that?
So I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that because I had all these plans for the next.
Tell me, but it should have gotten most of your books
Okay,
topics. And if you
sure.
just want to pick up from where you left off, and I can
Okay.
edit and stitch it together. So you were telling me about you published a book, you found a publisher, you published it, and then the publisher went out of business, and then you were trying to figure it out from
Yes.
there.
So I was really struggling to figure out what to do as far as what publisher to try next. If I needed to
Yeah.
go with a more nationally known publisher to have better luck, or if I should become an indie author. No pun intended, since I live in India. It's Indie instead. But I had no familiarity with publishing on my own, other than with blogs, um, which had been something, well, online content in general was something I had done for years since the internet existed, quite literally, because of the internet coming into existence. Opportunities popped up around the time that I was becoming a freelance
Mm.
writer. So that's how I got my start in writing. But I thought long and hard about whether I wanted to publish on my own, and I finally, um, after joining a group that was filled with a bunch of other authors I actually had read, yeah, they
Oh
all
wow.
had jumped on the bandwagon of becoming their own published selves, by taking control and doing it themselves. So I said, well, maybe I'll give that a try. And I did. I ended up republishing my book on Amazon directly. And so that's how I've continued on in my series. I am getting ready to finish the next book in the series, actually, called Worth Hoping For. So tentatively set for the end of this year. We'll see. I don't know.
Oh nice.
I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from finishing it. You know,
Yeah.
the strange thing, well, the ironic thing about what I was writing in the first book, with the main character's father passing away, um, was something that actually ended up happening in my own
Mm.
life, um, after my book came out. And so I think that was part of the reason why I did take a hiatus from writing, just to
Sure.
kind of wrap my head around everything. Um,
Sure.
but I have also written journals, in that not only does it have space for people to write their thoughts, prayers, and things like that, but long before I was writing fiction or nonfiction, I love poetry. So I have a collection of
Mm.
poems that I said, I should do something with these. So I said, well, I'll just make these journals and I'll put some of my poetry in those. And so those are also available on Amazon. I have a few of them.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So do you have like a little store on Amazon that people can find everything in one place, or is it all individual
So if
products?
they're looking for me as an author, if they go to my page on there on Amazon, it'll
Yeah.
list everything that's written by me. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
sure,
Send me
of
that link
course.
and I'll add it to the. So you've written two. Is this
Novel.
your second book? Your
Yeah,
novel at
and
least?
then I also have a mini biopic that I wrote back in about 2019. That was just kind of a little bit about my childhood, my faith, and how what I do with the Barbies actually changed my
Yeah.
life and uh,
Yeah.
healed a part of me that needed to be healed by what I'm doing.
Sure. what kind of church do you
So
go
it's a
to?
non-denominational church. It's based out of
Yeah.
Oklahoma called Life Church. Maybe you've heard of it. Um,
Wait,
yeah,
is it
mhm,
lifechurch.tv?
yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay.
So
So do
yes,
you do it
nope.
online, or is there a campus?
I've been trying
Okay.
to get them to have a local campus come to town. We've been in
Okay.
consideration for many years now, but they've never
Yeah.
made a decision, on doing it. But they've been close. I
Yeah.
mean, I've met with the team and everything that came to scope out the area before.
Nice.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I've been attending there for many years now, but I'm also a virtual volunteer. So once a week, I help out in their social media team to answer people's prayer requests and comments that they post
Yeah.
on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. Wow. So you dove right in. I see that pattern. At the school, you
Yeah.
invested. At the church, you're invested. You seem like a person who dives in and fills a need. So that's awesome to see the pattern with what you do. So Life Church is a non-denomination
Hmm.
denomination. That's awesome. I think I've known that. Well, it's not an
Hmm.
old, it's been around for a while, but I think I was also aware of when it
Hmm.
came into existence,
Hmm.
it was a
It
weird
was.
concept for a church to be
Yep.
completely online, right? Are they the people behind the Bible
Yes,
app as
yes,
well,
yes, yes,
YouVersion?
yes.
Right?
And I
Okay.
should say,
Yeah.
my biopic book that I spoke of, it's called Rebranded
Yeah.
by Faith. I turned it into a
Yeah.
Bible study plan that's on there on the Bible app. You can
Oh,
find it there.
really?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I'll have to check it out. So did you grow up Roman Catholic, or was that part of your
No.
upbringing at all?
So, okay. So on my dad's side, they were Protestant and Catholic, but
Yeah.
my mom's side, my grandma had been Catholic. Well, both my grandmas essentially were Catholics going into marriage with Protestants. It was how that worked.
Sure.
Um, and on my mom's side, my grandparents decided they were going to come to an agreement by becoming Seventh day Adventist, if you're familiar with that denomination. And
Yep.
when I was growing up, I had actually been to uh, my grandparents' church in India when I visited India. And I
Okay.
also visited whatever churches that my other side of the family were attending. And at that time, I believe was also it was either a Protestant or Catholic church. I can't remember quite honestly at that point.
Okay.
But I decided for myself to become Seventh Day Adventist, like my mom and her family, uh, for many years actually. And when my grandpa was widowed, he came and visited us here in the States, stayed with us for about a year and a half, and he was wanting to go to church. So we actually looked up which one was closest to us in the area and attended that church. And after he went back to India, we were still attending that church. My mom and I were. And but when my daughter was born, I suddenly felt very conflicted because I think it was kind of partially due to not knowing what I was anymore, but also what really
Sure.
defined me in my faith because I felt myself
Yeah.
separating from some of the things that I had been taught, but I wasn't pulling away
Yeah.
from God at the same time. So I went on my
Sure.
own like
Okay.
path and decided to become non-denominational and attended a few different churches in town and was doing that up until my daughter actually didn't believe the same as me and refused to go with me to church anymore um, because she just saw things differently, and we would have these philosophical discussions, and one thing led to the other,
Yeah.
and I was going by myself, and then I found Life Church, and I said, you know what, I'll stay home, but I'll watch church. And I really like that because it gave me no excuse, like I'm home, I
Yeah.
can do church.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now it's been, I think, about 13 years that I've been with Life Church. And it's been
Wow.
great because I've actually gotten to meet some of the people that I've come to know over the years. Um,
Mm.
and also by being a volunteer, uh, they've been very
Yeah.
sweet to me. So, like in losses and things like that, they've sent me stuff
Yeah.
to encourage me and things
Yeah.
like that. So it's still been
Yeah.
good, as
Is
part of
there?
community. So.
Yeah. Is there another group of people that go with you online, or is it like a community viewing
hmm
at least? In
Yeah.
some, oh, there is.
So in
Cool.
attending the service time that I attend, there's a chat group,
Yeah.
and every time
Got
that
it.
you go online to watch a service um, from the website, the chat pops up, and it's only good through that length of the service. But the same people, more or
Sure.
less, have been
Okay.
coming to that for years. And
Okay.
so, yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
so because of that group, like I actually was part of a couple of different Bible studies that came out of that. And
Awesome.
so one of them is more chat based, and we actually worked at trying to um, reach out to the people who were attending that service to be part of it. And over time, I actually
Yeah.
stepped away from that a little bit, but I've been kind of, coming back on there when I can to do
Yeah. Yeah.
the discussions and things like that with the group because it's cool. It's
Yeah.
it's very helpful and keeps me going through the week when I can do that. So yeah, it's all virtual.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Natasha, is there any secret hidden talent that you have? Do you cook
Oh my
Indian food?
gosh.
Are you good at cooking
So
Indian food?
I, I I didn't really grow up learning any of my family's
Yeah.
recipes. And it took going to India to visit for my mom to actually start making
Yeah.
food at home that was Indian.
Yeah.
Uh, I have a lot of
Mhm.
memories with the dishes that I enjoyed from my grandparents when they were alive. And
Yeah.
so there are certain things that we get if we want Indian food that we buy. Um, so I wouldn't say that I can cook any of it at all. No.
Yeah. How about
Oh.
Christmas sweets? Uh, if you grew up in India, probably I'm pretty sure your mom and dad were all also brought that over here. Were making all the like the kalkals and all
So,
that. Did you guys
um,
grow up with all of that?
my parents did. I didn't until I was in India. It wasn't anything that we made
Yeah.
here, but from
Yeah.
my aunt living in this country, the one that you're familiar with, she's the one who does all that. So if I want any of it, I just
Yes.
ask her. So she makes the calls and the rose cookies. I love rose cookies. That's my favorite. So
Yes. Yes. Is she making some
I'll have
this
to
year? I'll have
ask
to
her
connect
that.
with
That's
her.
a good question. So
Yeah. Yeah. She could. She could start a
yeah,
kalkal food
well,
truck or
and
something.
and she already does all the catering stuff. So if you, yeah, oh yeah,
Oh,
I
she
didn't know if you're
does.
familiar with that or not. Yeah, she does locally a
Yeah.
bunch of Indian food for catering stuff. So
Oh, nice. I'll have to speak with her as
yeah,
well. I'll have
yeah,
to
there,
connect with
giving her a plug. You hear
her.
that, Auntie?
Yes, if you live in the U.S. and you are Kalkal challenged like me, you should contact. Well, I'm
Yeah,
not sure if she
well,
wants a
yeah, I
name out there.
know.
I'm joking, but
Yeah,
it's,
that's
it's
right.
Natasha's aunt. Uh, but if she wants to make it official and legit, then we'll definitely put the business name out there and say you can buy Kalkals from her. Awesome, Natasha. Is there anything else you want to, any hidden talent? So thank you for, so just like I learned a lot from chatting with you, right? I was surprised to hear that you were born here. I always assumed an Anglo Indian was born in India, right? So yeah, thanks for, and your work with the Barbie doll project I think is fascinating, and I think most of all I like what I'm learning from you is like you invest in you, like I'm not sure if you saw the first podcast I did. It was with this chef from India. Her name is Bridget,
Mm-hmm.
and she's
Mm-hmm.
also a published author. But the things that she just did because she loved it, right? She
Mm-hmm.
just loved cooking, so she just cooked. And she shared recipes online. Didn't want it to be a business. That wasn't her intent. But people saw her love for what she did, and things naturally came to her because people when people see someone invested and
Mm-hmm.
genuinely caring about something they do, I think the contacts and the people will come to you. And I think like you also just you don't care for fame. You're not seeking that. You're just doing what you
Mm-hmm.
love because you have a genuine heart for it. And I hope if you do, I hope that people will connect with you and find people who truly care and keep it small as you want, but at least a genuine care. If it doesn't happen, I think you find contentment in doing it just because you want to do it, right? And that's the best part of it.
Yeah, well,
So
I mean, I think that you're very perceptive, definitely. Everything that you have said really, hits the nail on the head, so to speak. Um,
yeah,
because, yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying as far as wanting to be of help and how that just
yeah,
sort of just happens naturally, from the different
yeah,
connections made.
yeah,
And that's really
yeah,
like the important thing for me, um, because I'm all about knowing people well and making new contacts and helping the people who
yeah,
are around me and seeing the need that's there, to be able to make a
yeah,
difference, because that's how my bucket gets filled. And in fact,
yeah,
that the quote, see a need, fill a need, from the movie Robots is kind of like my
yeah,
motto. So when you literally said
yeah,
that, I just was like, oh, I have to say
yeah.
that. I have to make a note to tell you that. So,
I love it.
because that's
Yes,
quite true.
I love it.
And yeah, and you're right. People have been coming to me just to
Yeah,
find a way to have their Barbies be put to use, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And I will say, it's not like I'm well known by any stretch of the imagination.
sure.
My writing is limited. I mean, limited to certain audiences and all of that. I don't have a best-selling book. I'm not. Yeah,
Not
but I
yet.
mean,
Yeah,
I do what I do because I love doing what I do, and it's also therapy for me.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
half the time, the things that I have written, it just comes. Like it like I can't even explain it half the time.
yeah,
Uh, and I have
yeah,
also written religious content before. And so in those circles, some people may know me, and whatnot. But especially in this day and age, I think it's very important that we don't lose sight of the people in our lives, whether they're here for a
yeah,
season or for the long haul. Um, you have to invest in those relationships. And
yeah.
I have found it incredibly hard to maintain since 2020. And
Mm,
it's funny because I see the Anglo Indian community um, connecting with one another in different ways. But at the same
yeah,
time, like at least in my own family, I don't know if it depends, but I think like from 2020, everybody's kind of drifted. And so I have been
mm,
personally, trying to make the connections as best as I can with
yeah,
everybody. And
yeah,
it's hard. Um, Even with trying to get word out there with what I'm doing. Like I could tell you, I
yeah,
have just maybe a handful or less of people in my life, just in my family, who help me with what I'm doing.
mm,
Um, you know,
mm,
uh, it's more been friend based or just mutual acquaintance
yeah,
based that has kept me going
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
I guess that's the way it is. But yeah,
yeah,
so I think talking with you today has been really helpful because it kind of like reinforced in my mind with everything that we spoke about, um, the importance of not only being supportive of one another's endeavors, since we do have some things in common, right, with heritage and whatnot, um, but to also be able to um, get the rest of the Anglo Indian community to then kind of come
Yeah.
together more. Um, so,
Yeah.
like, I would love to see more Anglo Indians in my state. And quite honestly, like with my parents, they were always, from the time that I can remember, like my earliest memories has always been of my parents talking about all of the friends they had from school, those who migrated to the
Yeah.
US, those who went to other countries, and wanting to connect with all of them. And so uh, all those hubs where all the Anglo Indians are have been
Yeah.
all completely away from wherever we have ever lived. And so that's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
like they always wanted to have.
Yeah.
And I have found myself not necessarily fitting into any of that because it wasn't my childhood.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So
Sure.
that may
Yeah.
be like also
Absolutely.
like what your kids go through then. Because I
Yeah.
probably identify more with them
Yeah.
in that aspect of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But at the same
Yeah.
time, age
Yeah.
range wise, like we can kind of connect
Yeah.
better. And it
Yeah.
is still good to be part of whatever Anglo Indians exist in our age group, too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm trying to build
and
Pepperwater,
that's
trying to make
cool.
it a
That's
community
cool.
again. So, but I think doing the podcast and hearing people's stories
Sure.
is the easy way to do
Yeah.
it. But yes, thank you so much. I hope maybe you'll take this in the right way. In saying it, but I hope your other car gets flooded out of the garage with Barbies,
Yeah, okay. I'll
or
take it.
or you get
Yeah,
a new
I like
garage.
the new garage better.
Okay, maybe the new garage, and you just flood that, and both you and your husband, especially in Indy with the snow,
Yeah.
probably the person with the car outside is not good. But Indiana is a place where like I buy all my
Oh, okay.
musical gear from. It's There's this thing called
Hmm.
Sweetwater. If is in Indiana, I always think like I should just go there and visit Sweetwater one day, maybe. Yes, but definitely. Are you going to that Anglo Indian dance? I don't. I don't keep up with
Yeah.
that, but I know something like that happens.
I
Have you
have
been to one?
not. That's actually happening today.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
Oh, really? Okay. I guess
The
you're
one in
not.
Chicago is happening today,
Yeah.
and my aunt and her family went up there to go
Yeah.
to it. I
Okay.
have not
Nice.
been. Um, I honestly
Okay.
have never even been to any of the like celebrations that existed in India when
Yeah.
I was there because I was a kid, like I wouldn't have gone to any of
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
all of my aunts and
Yeah.
uncles have so many memories of that stuff. My parents,
Yeah.
not so much because they were older and so then they were adults and left, the country. So it
Yeah.
wasn't anything
Understandable.
that really was part of their thing either. But yeah, but their
Yeah.
siblings enjoy that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to maybe I'll speak
Yeah.
to some of those guys. They're doing some
Hmm.
cool and interesting things as well. But thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Enjoy the rest of your which
Nope,
time zone are
I'm
you?
same
Central?
time zone as you. I'm in Eastern. Yep. Hmm.
You're Eastern.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Are you on the cusp of Central
Well,
then,
for the
or what are
longest time,
you?
Indiana didn't even do daylight savings time. I mean, they
Oh,
did and then they
really?
didn't for many years and then started back up again.
Yeah.
So we would spend half the year in Central time zone and the other half in Eastern. So it confused everybody enough to where they said, all right, we're going to do this so that we are Eastern. So, but I think
Yeah.
there's still
Awesome.
a portion of upward, like northern Indiana, that is
God.
either
Yeah.
central or they don't change at all. I can't remember which, but it's messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. What are your plans for the rest of the day? Is it like date night Saturday? You and your husband? No kids? Or you just chilling
Um,
out?
So with it being the holiday season, I'm actually probably going to do a little
Yeah.
Christmas shopping with my mom because she lives
Nice.
nearby. So yeah,
Oh,
so I do
nice.
see her quite often. Um, and next weekend my daughter will be home, so we'll get to,
Oh,
yes,
she's coming
yes.
back for
So I'll
Christmas.
see her for a
Good.
couple of weeks.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I'm sure we'll chat on Facebook, but really appreciate you spending your time
Well,
with me
thank you.
this
Thank
afternoon.
you for having
Thank
me,
you so much.
Hannah. Have a good
Bye.
one.